Looking at the relatively tidy hall, Xiao Yan smiled and said, "Captain Qin is too polite. I have stayed in deep mountains and old forests for so long. Compared to those caves, this place is already excellent. Mr. Xiao Yan is so young, yet he can endure loneliness and hardship, cultivating alone in the deep mountains and old forests. Qin admires this perseverance." Qin Wei took a sip of tea and said sincerely, "I'm just used to it." Xiao Yan smiled lightly, stroking the exquisite teacup. After a moment of thought, he said, "Captain Qin, do you know that Lei Te?" Beside him, Qin Fei's mouth twitched slightly. This guy is really planning to make a move. Lei Te? That old man, Lei Te's grandson. Qin Wei frowned. Seeing Xiao Yan nod, a strange light flashed in his eyes. He took a small sip of tea and said, "Lei Te reached the 2nd Tier Imperial Preceptor level half a year ago. In these past 6 months, even if he hasn't advanced to 3rd Tier Imperial Preceptor, he is likely already at the peak of the 2nd Tier. Though young, he is ruthless and vicious in action. Those who have fought him have at least suffered broken bones. Moreover, he possesses some powerful Emperor techniques. An ordinary 1st Tier Imperial Preceptor is not even remotely a match for him. Falling Stone City is only this big, and cultivation resources are scarce, so naturally there are few geniuses. Among Imperial Preceptors under the age of 25, there are fewer than 10 in the entire Falling Stone City. But among these so-called talents, 4 were killed by that little beast Lei Te in battle, and another 2 were left permanently disabled." As he spoke, Qin Wei's eyes seemed to burn with anger. His grip on the teacup tightened, and cracks instantly spread across its surface. That little bastard is worse than an animal. In the past 6 months since arriving in Falling Stone City, at least dozens of good-looking girls have been ravaged by him, and 3 were even tormented to death. If it weren't for that old dog Lei protecting him, I would have long since taken that bastard's head. Qin Wei gritted his teeth, his voice trembling with rage. It was clear he harbored an extremely strong killing intent toward Lei Te. Crack! The moment he finished speaking, the teacup in his hand shattered violently, tea splashing everywhere. A faint surge of primordial Emperor Qi rippled across Xiao Yan's body, instantly dispersing the splashing tea. He couldn't help but pause in slight surprise, then let out a quiet, bitter smile and took another sip of tea. It seemed this Lei Te was truly a detestable young master. "Sorry, I got a little too agitated," Qin Wei said after taking a deep breath and suppressing his anger, looking at Xiao Yan apologetically. Soon after, the maids cleaned up the fragments and brought in a new cup of tea. From their practiced movements, it seemed this Captain Qin was someone who frequently broke teacups. Xiao Yan smiled and shook his head, but inside, a faint killing intent had quietly begun to rise. After a few more casual exchanges, Xiao Yan was arranged by Qin Wei into a very luxurious pavilion. This pavilion was the only one without any trace of blood or foul aura, and its furnishings were extremely lavish. Clearly Qin Wei had put considerable thought into it. After casually checking his surroundings, Xiao Yan closed the door. With a flick of his finger, several strands of reddish-golden flames shot out, sealing the doorway. With the power of the Imperial Flame, even if Qin Wei personally came, it should be able to hold him off for a few seconds. Although he knew it was unlikely to be necessary, it was always better to be cautious when away from home. After finishing all this, Xiao Yan let out a soft breath as a wave of exhaustion rose from deep within his body. Ever since leaving the illusion, he had not properly rested for a long time. Xiao Yan simply lay down and fell asleep. Although cultivation could replace sleep and somewhat relieve mental fatigue, it was never as direct as true rest. More importantly, the weariness deep in his soul could not be eased that way. "Father, it seems Xiao Yan really intends to participate in tomorrow's martial arena. If he wins, he will offend the Lei family. With Lei Te's petty nature, Xiao Yan may be in danger. If he loses, he may also incur the city lord's displeasure." After arranging Xiao Yan, Qin Fei returned to the main hall and said with a troubled expression, Qin Wei glared helplessly at Qin Fei's worried face and snorted coldly. If there were no restrictions, I would have acted myself. That little bastard of the Lei family is truly despicable. If Xiao Yan wins, not only me, even the city lord will be extremely grateful and will do everything to protect him. If that old dog Lei Te truly dares to act, the city lord and I will not sit idly by. We have tolerated that old dog for more than a day or two already. Qin Fei was not foolish. Hearing the last sentence, he suddenly jolted and said in a low voice, "Father, do you mean you and the city lord plan to join forces?" In Falling Rock City, there were only 4 or 5 Emperor Spirit Realm experts. One was his own father, another was that old dog Lei Te, and the last was the city lord. But among the 3, Lei Te was actually the strongest. After all, although he was a collateral clansman who had been expelled, he was expelled by a major family of Linxing City and still retained access to some powerful emperor techniques. Because of this, both his father and the city lord were quite wary of him, and the hostility between the two sides had grown deeper and deeper. This time, Lei Te's tyrannical forced marriage to the city lord's daughter seemed to be the trigger. Qin Wei narrowed his eyes slightly, a cold glint flashing within them. He did not speak, but the exquisite teacup in his hand was once again crushed into pieces with a bang. Night fell. Xiao Yan, who had slept most of the day, had already gotten up. He stretched lazily, and a surge of vitality from deep within his body filled him, making him unable to help but let out a soft hum of satisfaction. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, Xiao Yan pondered for a moment before looking at the inconspicuous black ring on his right hand. His heart trembled slightly. After thinking briefly, a strand of soul power surged out from between his brows and gently entered the black ring. Once his soul entered the ring, the first thing that appeared in his mind was a layer of soul barrier. Before Xiao Yan could think of a way to break it, the barrier seemed to sense a familiar aura within his soul and trembled slightly before automatically disappearing, allowing his soul to advance unimpeded. Sensing this, Xiao Yan could not help but feel a surge of joy. With the soul barrier in place, even if someone snatched the ring, their soul power probably would not be able to enter it. His soul power probed around inside the ring and eventually entered a faintly glowing spirit source pearl. The moment his soul entered it, a buzzing sound exploded in Xiao Yan's mind, striking directly at his soul. If not for the fact that his soul had undergone repeated tempering through pain and had grown much more resistant, this strike might have scattered his soul force. Ha! To be able to withstand this old man's soul strike, it seems you are indeed that little fellow Xiao Yan. Just as Xiao Yan was gritting his teeth and rubbing his head, a familiar voice suddenly echoed in his mind. "Teacher." Xiao Yan was startled, then quickly reacted. His eyes were filled with a trace of gloom. This was only a remnant soul imprint speaking. "Since your teacher is already dead, there is no need for further words. Originally, this ring contained countless medicinal herbs and pills, but after such a long time they have all gone bad and are now nothing but trash. As for Emperor techniques, there is a high-tier Emperor Law Scroll, but it is of another attribute, so you cannot cultivate it." Xiao Yan could only smile helplessly upon hearing this and said nothing. "Also, I have recorded the method to revive your ancestor in detail. If you can gather these materials, and once your strength is sufficient, you will be able to resurrect them." The voice paused, then added with a faint tremor, "I have also recorded the method to revive your teacher, but it is far too difficult. If it really doesn't work, then just forget it." As he spoke, 2 black scrolls fell from the ring. One had the character Xiao written on it, and the other had the character... I've said too much. In any case, the great world runs deep. Many things are not as simple as they appear. From now on, you will have to rely on yourself. Also, my 2 Emperor Flames are sealed within the Chi Source Pill that contains this information. Because their origin has been heavily damaged, it will take thousands of years to recover. If you manage to open the Chi Source Pill in the future, you may go to the Bright Flame Divine Domain, where you might find a way to restore the Emperor Flames. This is the last thing your teacher leaves you. By the end, the voice grew softer and softer until it became almost inaudible. Xiao Yan stared fixedly at the black ring on his finger, his body trembling slightly. After a long silence, he looked at the two black scrolls and decisively picked them up. His gaze hardened as he looked at the scroll marked E. He said nothing, but his tightly pressed lips said everything. "Teacher, your disciple will not let you down." After a long while, this soft sigh echoed within the dark room. The next day, Xiao Yan bade farewell to Qin Wei. Under Qin Fei's guidance, they passed through several streets and stopped in front of a rather luxurious martial arena located in the city center. Looking at it, a trace of surprise flashed in Xiao Yan's eyes. This martial arena was the most magnificent building he had seen in Falling Rock City. People of the forest domain truly did value martial strength. This saying was absolutely true. At this moment, the area around the martial arena was already crowded, and waves of conversation could be heard everywhere. TSK. If young Master Lei Te wins all 5 matches today, then the City Lord's beautiful daughter will become the Lei family's granddaughter-in-law. Not necessarily. Whether he can even finish those 5 matches is still uncertain. With Lei Te's ruthless methods, over 40 or 50 people have already been crippled by him in the past half year. Who would still dare to challenge him? Where there's heavy reward, there will be brave men. If no one challenges him, that old man Lei can always raise the prize money again. Anyway, no one can beat Lei Te. He could just make empty promises with his mouth and lose nothing, while even gaining a granddaughter-in-law for free. Upon hearing these words, Xiao Yan's brows twitched slightly. A hint of fervor surged in his eyes, and the corner of his mouth lifted into an almost imperceptible smile. Under Qin Fei's lead, he quickly entered the venue. Inside the martial arena, there were roughly several thousand seats. At the very center stood an enormous competition stage. At this moment, the arena was already boiling with noise and excitement. Although even the first match had yet to begin, the atmosphere was already extremely overwhelming. With Qin Fei taking care of all arrangements, there was naturally nothing for Xiao Yan to worry about. Soon, the two of them took seats in a relatively good spot close to the competition stage. Seeing Xiao Yan's eyes slightly narrowed, as if he were resting with his eyes closed, Qin Fei did not dare to speak. He could only turn his attention toward the arena. There, a young man of average build had already stepped onto the stage. Although he was only an 8 Dao Emperor soldier, the allure of the 500,000 Emperor crystal was simply too great. Moreover, there was also a scroll of intermediate Emperor formula, something extremely rare in Falling Stone City. After a short while, a clear bell chime suddenly echoed throughout the entire venue. Instantly, all the surrounding noise fell silent. As the bell faded, an elderly white-haired man dressed in a brightly colored outfit walked onto the competition stage with a smile. He nodded at the crowd amiably, then slightly cupped his hands toward several VIP seats. A faint tone of pride, mixed with powerful primordial Emperor Qi, resonated in everyone's ears. Today marks the final 5 matches of my grandson's 100 Battle Challenge. If he wins them all, then I and City Lord Lian will be united in marriage. At that time, I ask everyone here to bear witness. Of course, if Lei Te is not as skilled as others and loses to the challenger, then the 500,000 Emperor Crystal and the Scroll of Intermediate Emperor Formula will be presented on the spot by this old man. Now let the match begin. After speaking, he smiled as he glanced at the challenger beside him, then stepped down with light and relaxed strides. Looking at the white-haired elder's back, Xiao Yan also let out a soft breath inwardly. This old fellow was far stronger than Qin Wei. In Xiao Yan's perception, his aura was long and profound, and the primordial Emperor Qi within his body was vast and solid. He had likely already reached the peak of the Emperor's Spirit Peak stage. Taking one more step forward would place him among the true experts even in the Western Star Commandery, the Emperor King. Of course, whether he could actually take that step was another matter entirely. That old fellow is Lei Ku, Qin Fei said with a curl of his lip. Just as he was about to continue speaking, a handsome young man in white robes had already slowly stepped onto the stage. As he entered the competition area, the aura of a second-tier Imperial Master erupted from his body. Lei Te. I ask for your guidance. Lei Te. I ask for your guidance. Arrogant and conceited words came from the white-robed young man's mouth. The audience seats responded with mostly cold snorts. Over the past half-year, his actions had earned him the contempt of most people present. Nearly 9 out of 10 harbored resentment toward him. However, regarding his talent, everyone could only sigh inwardly. With his current strength, he did have the capital to be arrogant. Xiao Yan's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Lei Te standing proudly on the stage. The latter had a tall nose bridge and sharp, well-defined features, making him quite handsome. At this moment, however, the somewhat harsh curve of his lips carried a cold, self-satisfied smile, and his gaze toward the challenger carried an almost disdainful look, as if he were looking at a dead man. Your humble one is Wang Fei. I hope young master Lei will show some mercy. The thin young man named Wang Fei said after taking a deep breath, cupping his hands toward Lei Te. Although he was confident in his own strength, he knew exactly how vicious the young man before him was. Even Imperial Masters of the same level posed little threat to him. With his 8 Dao Emperor Soldier strength, victory was nothing more than a fantasy. But the temptation of the 500,000 Emperor Crystal was too great. If he could obtain it, all his current difficulties would be resolved. Rest assured, since you've already chosen to submit, this young master will naturally show mercy, Lei Te said with a cold smile. After the referee below gave the order, Lei Te's figure suddenly changed. Moving at extreme speed with faint traces of thunder, he shot toward Wang Fei. At the same time, a voice filled with coldness and brutality echoed across the arena, causing the expressions of the spectators to change slightly. I don't want your life. You only need to leave behind one leg. Wang Fei's expression drastically changed, a flush of greenish pallor instantly surfacing on his face. Sensing the sharp fist wind about to strike his face, he did not even have time to curse. His body flickered, and faint primordial Emperor Qi surged from his feet as he attempted to evade the fierce strike. Hiv. A chilling voice suddenly rang out in Wang Fei's mind. Before he could react, a leg infused with thunderous momentum swept toward him. Wang Fei's expression changed wildly. If that kick landed, his leg would be crippled. Immediately, primordial Emperor Qi surged out of his body, forming a faint light barrier in the direction of Lei Te's incoming attack. The barrier flickered with silver light, clearly possessing considerable defensive power. Just as Wang Fei's heart had barely begun to settle, a sharp wind-breaking sound suddenly rang out. Before he could even react, a chilling hand had already clamped around his neck. With only the slightest pressure, it felt as if his head would be torn clean from his body. Hiss! Seeing that Wang Fei, a peak 8 Dao Emperor soldier, was so easily defeated by Lei Te, most of the people in the stands drew a sharp breath. This fellow's strength was indeed far greater than it had been half a year ago. Pinned by the neck in Lei Te's grip, Wang Fei looked at the vicious smile on the latter's face, and his heart immediately began to pound wildly. His voice trembled as he said, I admit. Crack. Before he could finish, Lei Te's knee suddenly slammed viciously into Wang Fei's thigh. A clear, bone-shattering sound instantly echoed throughout the entire martial arena. Everyone in the stands witnessed this scene, their expressions shaking as anger and fear once again surfaced in their eyes as they looked at Lei Te. Immediately after, an inhuman, agonized scream erupted from Wang Fei's mouth. The pain of the fractured bone pierced deep into his organs. His body trembled violently before collapsing onto the stage from the intense pain. That brat from a Lei Clan is being far too ruthless. At that moment, from the VIP seats, a deep voice filled with anger slowly rang out. Anyone could clearly sense the faint killing intent hidden within it. Xiao Yan also turned toward the source of the voice. On the VIP platform, a middle-aged man in a brocade robe had already risen, slamming his hand on the table. A naturally imposing aura emanated from him. Hee, City Lord Lien, these are just children sparring. If you choose to intervene, wouldn't that be beneath your status? Beside him, Lei Te, dressed in flamboyant colors, also stood up and stared tightly at the middle-aged man. Upon hearing this, the middle-aged man took a deep breath. His expression darkened as he glanced at Lei Te below, who was acting as if nothing had happened, then turned back to Lei Te with a cold laugh. If it weren't for you, that little beast Lei Te wouldn't even be able to walk out of this martial arena alive. Lei Te's expression sank immediately. After a long pause, he forced a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. Unfortunately, I'm afraid I won't be dying anytime soon. Besides, this is already Teir's 96th consecutive victory. For more matches remain. I hope City Lord Lien won't disappoint me. The middle-aged man let out a cold snort and flicked his sleeve. Then I also wish him 100 consecutive victories, and hope he isn't crippled or killed in the next match. Lei Te sneered. Thank you for your concern, City Lord Lien. However, I'm afraid your wish won't come true. With another cold snort, the middle-aged man returned to his seat. He glanced at a nearby young woman in a white dress and shook his head with a bitter smile. Seeing this, the girl's pretty face immediately dimmed. She bit her red lip and looked toward the arrogant Lei Te below, hatred flickering undisguisedly in her beautiful eyes. The crowd below seemed accustomed to the confrontation between these two great figures. After a brief commotion, they shifted their attention back to the arena, where Wang Fei, now barely conscious, had already been carried away. That's the City Lord? Xiao Yan asked softly. Qin Fei nodded, though a bitter smile formed in his heart. Earlier, when Lei Te had crippled Wang Fei's leg, he had already noticed a trace of killing intent flash across Qin Wei's face in the distance. Now, seeing the increasingly sharp conflict between the City Lord and Lei Te, he understood that what his father had told him yesterday was likely about to come true. That Lei Te bastard is far too ruthless, Qin Fei muttered after coming back to his senses. Looking at Lei Te on the stage, whose expression remained completely unchanged, even Qin Fei, the second young master of a mercenary corps who had long lived a life of bloodshed, felt a trace of fear. In contrast, Xiao Yan remained calm and indifferent from beginning to end. Even when Lei Te had broken Wang Fei's leg, there hadn't been the slightest change in his expression. Just who exactly was this guy? Having easily crippled Wang Fei, Lei Te's expression remained unchanged, still carrying that faint smile. But in the eyes of the crowd, that smile only felt colder and more vicious. After a moment passed with no one stepping up to challenge him, Lei Te's brows furrowed deeply. For the so-called 100-match agreement, he had struggled for more than half a year. During that time, every time he saw that increasingly beautiful girl, his heart burned with desire, wishing he could immediately pull her into his arms. However, due to the City Lord's harsh warning, he had forcibly suppressed that thought. To him, the 100-match agreement mattered more than anything. Today was the final 5 matches. He had to finish them no matter what. Thus, this awkward silence in the arena left him extremely dissatisfied. The audience also quickly understood the situation. Given Lei Te's ruthless methods, any sensible person could see that stepping up now would be suicide. Money was tempting, but only if one had a life to spend it. Brother Xiao Yan, aren't you going up? Qin Fei couldn't help but ask as he noticed Xiao Yan still sitting motionless, calmly watching the stage. Hearing this, Xiao Yan let out a cold laugh. His gaze casually drifted toward the back, toward Lei Te, who was also beginning to show signs of impatience. A strange light flickered in his eyes as he said softly, "That depends on how much Lei Te is willing to pay for Lei Te's life." After speaking, under Qin Fei's stunned expression, Xiao Yan smiled faintly and once again turned his gaze toward the stage. His eyes slightly narrowed as he repeatedly analyzed and savored Lei Te's fighting style from earlier. On the VIP stand, seeing the abruptly chilled atmosphere in the arena, Lei Te could not help but stand up. His expression turned somewhat gloomy as he swept his gaze across the hall. His voice, wrapped in primordial Emperor Qi, echoed clearly in everyone's ears. If anyone is willing to fight, the Lei Clan will immediately offer 50,000 Emperor crystals. If you win, the reward will be 600,000. Huh. Hearing this sudden increase in the generous terms, everyone in the stands was shocked, and then a wave of commotion broke out. Some young men under the age of 25 were also stirred into action, their eyes turning red as they looked at Lei Te on the arena stage. The fear in their expressions was noticeably reduced. Where there is great reward, there are bound to be brave men. 600,000 Emperor crystals was an enormous temptation for most people present. After a brief stir, a young man whose strength was roughly at the level of a 7 Dao Emperor soldier took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage under the watchful eyes of the crowd. The moment the referee called the start before the young man could even unleash his Emperor technique, Lei Te suddenly closed the distance and kicked him in the chest. His chest caved in instantly as he spewed fresh blood, flying backward like a broken kite. He crashed heavily into a row of seats, smashing them to pieces. The young man, who had not even lasted a minute on stage, tilted his head and lost consciousness. 97 matches. Kicking the young man off the stage, Lei Te revealed an uncontrollable look of excitement on his handsome face. Just 3 more matches, and he would obtain the beauty he had long dreamed of. Seeing how quickly the young man had been defeated, the middle-aged man in luxurious robes on the VIP stand grew even more gloomy. The slender jade hand tightly held in his grip trembled slightly upon hearing the 97th match number, turning somewhat cold. Standing in the VIP stand, Lei Te swept his indifferent gaze across the arena, his expression darkening further. He noticed that after Lei Te's kick, those young men who had been eager to try earlier had all fallen silent, shrinking back in fear and none daring to step forward. 700,000 Emperor crystals. That indifferent voice once again struck the hearts of everyone present like a massive hammer. Some people's breathing even became rapid. 700,000. So many Emperor crystals that most of the people here had never even seen before. Xun'er sat expressionlessly at a seat slightly farther from Lei Te. Hearing the reward increase by another 100,000, he frowned slightly. He glanced at Xiao Yan below, whose smile had grown a bit more pronounced, and suddenly understood something. He sneered. 700,000 Emperor crystals. Clan head Lei is quite bold. It's still uncertain whether your Lei Clan's annual income even reaches that amount. Yet you're being so generous this time. Lei Te glanced at Xun'er from afar and smiled faintly. Clan leader Qin need not worry. I know my own clan's finances better than you do. You certainly know better than me. Xun'er sneered. Old man, just say it directly. What's the highest reward you can offer? This slow boiling the frog tactic of yours is rather unwise here. What? Does clan leader Qin want your young master to step in? Lei Te said coldly. Very well, I'll be frank. The highest reward I can offer is 1,200,000 Emperor crystals. Whoever has the confidence, feel free to come and claim it. Although furious inwardly, Lei Te understood that if he raised the reward step by step, these people would eventually become numb to it. It was better to strike hard at once and shock everyone. Naturally, those driven by greed would not be able to resist. 1,200,000. Hearing this number, everyone in the stands gasped in shock. As Lei Te had expected, several young men immediately stood up almost simultaneously. Even Xun'er, shaken slightly by such a massive figure, twitched his expression before smiling faintly. My son may not be as talented as your young master, but his character is slightly better. I am already very satisfied. As he spoke, a sly smile suddenly appeared at the corner of Xun'er's mouth. He looked toward a certain spot below and called out loudly. Little friend Xiao, I've already helped you squeeze out the highest reward. It's your turn to make a move now, isn't it? Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan, who had just been slightly astonished by Lei Te's offer, could not help but freeze for a moment. Then he shook his head with a wry smile. That old fox really is quite cunning. Whoosh! With Qin Wei's voice, all eyes in the arena instantly turned towards Xiao Yan's position, filled with doubt and curiosity. Xiao Yan. Lei Te frowned slightly, his sharp gaze shooting down like a blade. What came into view was a clean-cut young man with a resolute face. On that face, a pair of bright eyes met his gaze head-on, without the slightest hint of fear. On the platform, Lei Te stood with his arms crossed. Hearing Qin Wei's voice, he also turned his gaze in the direction of the sound. When he realized that Xiao Yan's strength was only at the level of an Emperor Master, a flash of surprise first appeared on his face, followed by a cold sneer. A trace of excited, ruthless expression flickered briefly in his pupils. Xiao Yan glanced at Lei Te indifferently and calmly withdrew his gaze. With Lei Te's Emperor Spirit level pressure, it was completely ineffective against him. His soul power, already tempered by overwhelming pressure, felt nothing at all against such a weak aura. There was not even the slightest pain. Clan leader Lei, using pressure against a junior doesn't seem very appropriate for your status, does it? Qin Wei immediately noticed a hint of aura suppression in Lei Te's gaze and was first slightly startled. Just as he was about to reprimand him, he saw that Xiao Yan had calmly withstood it, and Qin Wei couldn't help but pause, swallowing his words back down. However, the middle-aged man beside Lei Te let out a cold snort at that moment, his tone filled with boundless coldness and rage. Anyone could sense how much anger was hidden beneath those seemingly plain words. Retracting his gaze with a look of surprise, Lei Te looked at the middle-aged man and said with a fake smile, "It's rare for Captain Qin to value a junior so much. Of course I had to observe him carefully." After saying this, he turned toward Qin Wei and said in a deep voice, "Captain Qin, this person doesn't seem to be from Falling Rock City, is he?" Sitting in a luxurious seat, Qin Wei narrowed his eyes slightly after hearing Lei Te's words and said indifferently, "Old man, save your nonsense. That little brat Lei Te has already won 97 matches. If you still care about these things, then your daydream today won't come true." Qin Wei. Lei Te was, after all, the head of a clan and had once been a member of a great family. His pride was naturally immense. Hearing Qin Wei repeatedly call him old man and little brat, he finally erupted in fury. "Don't think that just because we're both Emperor spirits, I won't dare to act. With your mere 5 Dao Emperor spirit strength, I can kill you within 10 moves." Qin Wei frowned. Feeling the powerful aura surging from Lei Te's body, he quietly glanced at the middle-aged man seated beside Lei Te. The middle-aged man also looked back at him. Their eyes met, and both gave a subtle nod. Lei Te's peak Emperor Spirit aura erupted, instantly sounding like a muffled thunderclap exploding throughout the massive arena, causing many weaker spectators to turn deathly pale. Some even had their breathing become rapid, sweat already soaking through their clothes. "Lei Te, this is not your Lei family's place." Just as everyone was filled with shock, the silent middle-aged man suddenly shouted. Golden light burst forth from his body like a sharp golden sword light pressing straight toward Lei Te. His equally formidable aura, only a line weaker than Lei Te's, erupted as well, breaking apart the oppressive force that filled the entire hall. Seeing this, the enraged Lei Te paused. After a brief flicker in his eyes, he still withdrew his sharp aura back into his body with a dark expression, then said with a somewhat ferocious look, "Xianxia, you will regret this in the future." In terms of strength, although Xianxia was already an 8 Dao Emperor Spirit, to Lei Te, who had been at the peak Emperor Spirit level for 2 or 3 years, an 8 Dao Emperor Spirit was not enough to warrant serious attention. However, Xianxia was the city lord of Falling Rock City. Although Falling Rock City was not large, it had a 500-man city guard. Among them were many strong experts. Moreover, when ants gather, they can even kill an elephant. With the Lei family's mere dozens of servants, they did not dare easily offend Xianxia. Likewise, Xianxia also did not dare push Lei Te into a dead end. After all, he was a genuine peak Emperor Spirit expert. Although the 500 city guards were numerous, there were only a little over 20 city guard captains at the Emperor Master level. Those people could handle the Lei family's relatively capable servants. But against Lei Ku, they stood no chance at all. Because of this delicate balance, Lin Yunhai and Lei Ku, bitter rivals for a year, had maintained a fragile peace. But now, this balance seemed to be on the verge of being broken. Lin Yunhai also looked at Lei Ku with a dark expression, took a deep breath, and said, "This city lord is acting according to the law. This martial arena falls under Falling Rock City's jurisdiction. If you continue using your aura to oppress others, don't blame me for being ruthless." Hearing Lin Yunhai's furious words, Lei Ku's expression twitched slightly. In the end, he still let out a cold snort, glancing darkly at Qin Wei in the distance. Qin Wei ignored him, and instead turned his attention once again to Xiao Yan below. "Kid, stop wasting time. If you've got the guts, come up." Seeing everyone's attention once again focused here, Lei Te sneered. His fingers cracked loudly inside his sleeves as he stared at Xiao Yan not far below, his eyes filled with excitement, as if his 98th consecutive victory was already within reach. 1,200,000. As if completely unaware of the earlier conflict, a trace of surprise also flashed in Xiao Yan's eyes. A reward of 1,200,000 Emperor crystals. Lei family truly was wealthy. If he could obtain it, the 1 million Emperor crystals required for the Holy Rank trial would be much closer. Thinking of this, even Xiao Yan, despite his usual composure, could not help but take a deep breath, a flash of indescribable joy flickering in his eyes before quickly disappearing. Under the focused gazes of everyone in the arena, Xiao Yan lifted his head and gave a faint smile. A trace of wind power rose beneath his feet, and his body blurred. When he reappeared, he was already standing on the combat platform. Witnessing Xiao Yan's speed, Lei Te's pupils slightly contracted, and the smile on his face seemed to fade considerably. He looked up and met Xiao Yan's calm, unfathomable gaze. Lei Te's expression darkened slightly, then twisted into a savage grin. Just a first-tier Imperial Master. So what if he was faster? In the face of absolute strength, any technique was meaningless. A sharp glint flashed through his eyes, and Lei Te let out a cold laugh, a hint of madness lingering in his gaze as he looked at Xiao Yan. Lei Ku was briefly startled by the speed Xiao Yan had casually displayed, his brows immediately furrowing. His strength far surpassed everyone in the stands, so he had a far deeper understanding of the impact of that speed Xiao Yan had just shown. That kind of velocity was simply not something an ordinary Imperial Master could possess. However, Lei Ku quickly relaxed his brows. He knew Lei Te's strength better than anyone. Even against an ordinary 5th-tier Imperial Master, Lei Te could still put up a fight. Moreover, Xiao Yan was merely a 1st-tier Imperial Master. Experts of this level, Lei Te had personally killed at least 10 of them. Qin Wei and Lin Yunhai, both Imperial Spirit experts, also clearly saw Xiao Yan's speed. At that moment, a faint sense of delight rose in their hearts. In particular, Lin Yunhai's usually steady gaze now carried a trace of hope. Beside him, a beautiful woman in a white dress lightly stepped forward, her jade-like hands gripping the railing tightly as she watched the black-robed youth on the stage with nervous anticipation. This was not the final match, but it would decide her future. Even Captain Qin Wei was quite satisfied with this young man on the stage. The speed he had just displayed was something she had never seen among peers of her generation. In her eyes, this young man was their last hope, and she could not help but feel anxious. "Kid, this is this young master's 98th match. Since even the city lord and Qin Wei thinks so highly of you, I hope you can last a bit longer. Don't end up like those two before you," Lei Te said casually, patting his clothes and letting out a cold sneer. "Too much nonsense. But don't worry. After all, it's 120,000. I'll make sure you feel it," Xiao Yan replied lightly, his hands gently clenched as he sensed the increasingly sharp aura around Lei Te, completely unfazed. Hearing this, Lei Te let out a sinister laugh. I wonder if your strength is as sharp as your tongue. You reckless fool. I'll cripple your legs as punishment later." The next moment, at the referee's command to begin, Lei Te's aura exploded outward. His figure flashed forward, his right hand forming a palm strike that carried a surging force as it blasted toward Xiao Yan. Too slow. Xiao Yan smiled faintly at the rushing Lei Te. Wind power surged beneath his feet, and like a shadow, he vanished amid a whooshing gale. The palm strike missed. Lei Te's expression did not change. He stomped the ground hard with his right foot and immediately shot sideways. The next instant, a fist containing immense force slammed into the spot where he had just stood. Feeling the power contained in Xiao Yan's fist, Lei Te's expression darkened slightly. This strike was actually comparable to the full-force blow of a second-tier Imperial Master. Before he could recover, the sound of air bursting came from behind him, followed by a fierce, sharp force smashing toward his back. Lei Te was greatly alarmed. There was no time to dodge. With a thought, a lightning defense net crackling with thunder threads instantly materialized behind him. In the next moment, Xiao Yan's Thousand Illusions roaming dragon leg came crashing down with unparalleled ferocity, striking heavily against the defensive lightning net. Even with the lightning defense net absorbing the blow, Lei Te still let out a muffled groan. His face quickly paled as his body uncontrollably lurched forward. The lightning net behind him also dimmed rapidly after blocking the attack. "Bastard!" Lei Te cursed angrily, forcibly halting his forward momentum and stopping himself. He turned to look at Xiao Yan, who was smiling faintly, rage surging within his chest. The pain in his back made his brows furrow deeply. Since arriving in Falling Stone City, no one had ever made him feel pain before. Seeing Lei Te on the verge of going berserk, Xiao Yan's expression also turned slightly more serious. Although the Thousand Illusions roaming dragon leg was only a mid-emperor decree technique, he knew its power very well. Even an ordinary second-tier Imperial Master level intermediate spirit beast would be severely injured if struck directly. Yet Lei Te had only let out a muffled groan. Thinking of this, Xiao Yan's gaze shifted toward the lightning defense net that was gradually dissipating behind Lei Te, and he nodded thoughtfully. It seemed that this lightning net was also an Emperor Decree level technique. From the stands, Lei Te raised an eyebrow upon seeing this scene, his gaze toward Xiao Yan becoming increasingly serious. What Lei Te had just used was a mid-level defensive Emperor Decree obtained from the Lei Clan of Lingxing Commandery, Lightning Defense Net. It could even withstand weaker, high Emperor Decree techniques for a time. Yet this young man had shattered it with nothing more than a mid-level leg technique Emperor Decree. How was that even possible? Beside him, Lin Yunhai's eyes flickered with a trace of excitement. After so many matches, this was the first time he had seen someone injure Lei Te. As a result, the hope in Lin Yunhai's heart grew a little stronger. "Little guy, I'm counting on you." Glancing at Lei Te beside him, whose expression was somewhat unpleasant, Lin Yunhai let out a soft sigh and murmured inwardly, "Good kid, you've got some skills." Lei Te sneered coldly at Xiao Yan with a somewhat ferocious expression and suddenly said in a low voice, You are the first challenger to make me feel pain. You do have ability, but you will pay the price for your rudeness." As he spoke, Lei Te's expression darkened, and an aura far more powerful than a second-tier Imperial Master erupted from his body. The sharp, violent wind pressure caused some Do-D-level experts in the nearby stands to flush red and break out in cold sweat. Peak third-tier Imperial Master. Xiao Yan's brows twitched slightly as he looked at Lei Te, a trace of surprise flashing through his eyes. According to Qin Fei's earlier information, when Lei Te returned to Falling Stone City half a year ago, he was only a second-tier Imperial Master. Now he had already reached peak third-tier Imperial Master. Although there was still some gap before the fourth-tier Imperial Master, this cultivation speed could not be described as anything less than astonishing. He stretched his body slightly, listening to the cracking sounds of bones within him, while Lei Te locked his gaze tightly onto Xiao Yan and said coldly, "Kid, it's over." 98th victory. Thank you for your contribution. As he spoke, his figure suddenly moved, shooting toward Xiao Yan like a streak of white light. A domineering surge of primordial emperor chi, like a golden great blade, slashed straight toward Xiao Yan. Third Tier Imperial Master. It's not like I haven't killed one before.